and we were really honored to be able to have, she's Caroll Estes. She's an incredible advocate for, oh God, for everyone. She,
I was trained by Maggie.
many years she was head of the National Committee to Save Social Security and Medicare, and she's just been wonderful to know. So, take it away.
So Maggie Kuhn was somebody that I met when I was in my first year teaching at the University of California, San Francisco. And I was teaching the class on policy and aging. And I had this graduate student who came up afterwards and said, "You have got to meet Maggie Kuhn." Well, by then Maggie was on TV and gaining much traction. I said, "Maggie Kuhn, you know her?" And she said, "Oh yes, she lives in my block, and I'm, founding Great Panther with her." And so immediately, within a week, I was on a plane to meet Maggie in Philadelphia, and I met her at her home. And she was such an incredible woman who was truly present and interested. And the young people were complete family for her. And she loved nothing better than finding out what was your passion and plugging in the broader picture. And I had never met anyone like her from the standpoint of attraction and a whole concept of co-presence. It was an electrical energy that was, and synergy that happened. And we could see that just from what we were witnessing there. And one of the things that was my privilege, well, so many things that she taught me. She was coming through, flying around, doing presentations in many, many places. And she would call me and say, "Caroll, where is the book?" The book was my first book, The Aging Enterprise, and I was working on it when I met her in Philadelphia. And I was a young assistant professor and, in all the committees and no time for anything, trying to, do due diligence on that. But she said, "No, we have to have it. We have to have it." So she really pushed me into it and telling me why we had to have it. And basically that book was and is about the industry of serving the elderly and creating a form of social control and ageism and denial, and about the commodification and privatization, and really all the way up to the commercialization, medicalization that was very uninhabitable, really, for having an identity and a real life of meaning and purpose. So that book would have never happened without Maggie's insistence. And when it came out, she carried it around on the stump. And that was just an enormous energizer, obviously. But she was so impressive in terms of action, social action, the going to the hearings, getting stuff done in a short amount of time, and the more outrageous, in a sense, the better. But more than that, I think the fact of how prescient she was. It was as if we were watching what's going on today. What I handed out was something that the great Panthers was doing at the time that I was meeting and working with Maggie. And here she was speaking to the Democratic and Republican parties about saving Social Security. And the privatizers, from the time she had seen her father failing with real estate interests that he had had on Wall Street and all that, was very much the messenger about how important it is to understand that everything is connected. That if Social Security and is connected to democracy in a democratically held society, and the contradictions were something that she was not willing to accept. And she would confront them, as we saw her do. And I think of her as cutting across cross lots, the bringing together of different people in different stages, in different places, different social classes, race, class, gender, as we now talk about it, and intersectionalities much, much more so. But she just went right through no trespassing signs. There were no trespassing signs for Maggie. And she was teaching us how we were all in this together. And it was the whole concept of outrageousness, bringing together theory and practice, called often praxis, and doing the work. So she moved us way out of conventional thinking toward what in academia we sometimes talk about paradigm shift, and breaking the paradigms and creating the new ones, which are we're all human, we're all in this together. And the four things that she would always say: do your homework, know your case, go to the top. Go to the top of whatever your situation that your case and cause is about. Put your body on the line and speak even though your voice shakes. And for me, as seeing myself as a little girl in the South who was privileged in many respects, but as a girl in the South, I was assigned to the kind of caregiving role forever. And I saw that in my mom, and I was very concerned about that. Do your homework, go to the top, and speak your voice even though it shakes. But she was a master of healing ourselves from brain damage. She would talk about the brain damage that our society has done to our heads. Freeing ourselves and our society from social fictions. I'm quoting her about getting and being old, finding and instead finding new, wholly affirming images, building a new community, making it happen based on social justice, human compassion, and selfhood. She was a feminist, but she was a humanitarian and a peacenik, we might have called that. And she used to say, we have nothing to lose. What have you got to lose? Our kids, our Vietnam, our college kids, the younger generation, they have a lot to lose putting certain things on the line. We can speak and do in ways that we are able to take risks. So she was a realist. A lot of what we talk about doesn't sound like realism, but it was ultimate pragmatism and commitment to justice and structural change. As a sociologist, which she was in her undergraduate education, she had studied C. Wright Mills, who talked about the political elite, the power elite, and the tower of power at the top, and that personal biography and policy intersected, and our personal lives were, in many respects, what we're seeing and going through ourselves are the best barometer of areas in which we come up across barriers and things that need to be changed, especially in terms of money and corporate control. And with her peace and justice mission, she, of course, as many of you know, had the Grey Panthers very involved. It was the first non-governmental organization, NGO, in the UN, in the United Nations. And we had a presence there. And there is still a presence there. And it was something that she cast all over the world. I had the privilege of going with her to England, and where she and I were both paired up as speakers. And she went around England and really around Europe, and there were many national organizations that formed, like the Grey Panthers or other equivalents that she incited, because she couldn't sit still, and she didn't want anybody else to sit still. And it wasn't for lack of vision and imagination and compassion. She said the Panthers should bring together people who don't think they have a voice, and the youth and the elderly. We don't call them elderly anymore. Youth and elders together, the wise. We're the wise at both ends of this age spectrum, young and old, and we share her work on racism and ageism is very insightful. And she, just as she had done with regard to the youth and age, and we think of the youth and the problems in youth today, the work that needs to be done and the engagement, it's like we are on a mission that Maggie has envisioned and prepared us for. And she never saw a struggle that she didn't want to get involved in. She said, I never saw a cause I didn't want to be involved in. And that's the way, in a sense, with the hashtag Black Lives Matter, with all of the things that are happening, particularly in this current era, the crisis of democracy, the lost labor, the dissection of our meaning and our daily community and lives is something that was profound. And I think about how in 1988, Grey Panthers had a study guide on economic rights, economic security. It was a working document by the Grey Panthers Task Force, and that was in part because of this privatization. It was sort of the guns versus butter, but the butter was all our butter. It wasn't just some of our butter. It was all of our butter. And it opens with this statement: the study guide on economic rights and economic security. What we expect of an economic system, that an economy ought to serve human needs, an economy ought to be directed by democratic means. And they had this position paper that came out in 1982, which states, quote, "Gray Panthers believe that Social Security is a contract between the American people and their elected government to provide every citizen with the dignity of financial independence. It is based on the constitutional right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all Americans, including women, minorities, the disabled, the young, the widowed, orphaned, as well as the aged." And we together went to Wingspread with Ed Roberts and the independent living movement, and it was the first major outreach to the disability community that had an entirely different philosophy than the policies that were being rendered for older people. And there, we weren't allowed to use the words the long-term care. The disability community was not having that. It's independent living for them. For Maggie, it was interdependent living, as well as independent living. And I recall once she was here, it was the nomination of the president of the Democratic Party, and Maggie always had the best tickets and the best seats, and you'd just be walking with her, and you know, the wave, it would just, the wave would part, and everybody's running up to her. This was in, I can't remember exactly which year it was, but we were walking out my steps from my house in San Francisco, and she had these knees and these hands that she saw, and she was struggling, and she'd wear long skirts, long, gorgeous clothes, but you know, with tennis shoes under them. And I was worried about, there was no railing at my house on the stairs, and I said, "Maggie, I don't want to make you feel dependent, but would you mind if I take your arm?" She said, "Oh, my dear, don't you know we're all interdependent? Give me that arm." I thought she'd never asked. It's like, oh my. Sort of like she was always a lesson in humility and vision. So the idea of her having prepared us for this moment is the one that she, and I think she would concur with, is one that I want to leave us with, which is that we are facing the perils beyond Pauline, plus, in every sector of our society and globe. And she would be all about our doing exactly, going with the resistance, being part of the resistance, being actors, doing our homework and going to the top in whatever cause we see is necessary, and understanding the importance of liberation struggles as liberation struggles and the opportunities that they offer. They are truly empowering and give us an ownership of the future, the present, and the social change. I loved her Watchdogs and Watch Bitches, her media stuff. Just think what, you know, the whole cultural arts and identities and all of these things that we're concerned about in our society. She was a beacon of what is out there, the need for identity and the need for the interrelationship of identities and for oppressions that are intersecting race, class, ethnicity, gender, immigration. She would have been so on the front lines. We would have seen her in El Paso. We would have seen her in all these dark places that we are witnessing every day. So her idea of being connected and avoiding our own self-objectification and our own learned helplessness. This is something that I myself am very concerned about. I worried about losing my mind and all of the work on the brain and the relation of body and spirit. And Maggie was that beacon of the future and how important that spirit and mind enlivening, engaging, and really being so pervasive for our society. So I just leave you with the idea that it is so fabulous that everybody in this room is here. And I have to say this Michael Lyon guy over here is, he is an absolute miracle in and of himself and keeps us going and together, but as a collaborative. And he never met an injustice that he wasn't willing to engage and open up the doors with housing and homelessness and the atomic energy and the global issues and the militarization, the corporatization, the imperialism, all of it. So I thank Michael, we're really blessed. And I thank
Well, you've given us a lot to think about.
we've been
I
here
don't know
before.
I don't know where to begin. I mean, one thing I'm kind of curious about is this question about how the time we're in right now compares with the time when Maggie Kuhn was most active. You know, it was the 70s, early 70s, and all of the activism and the rebellions of the 60s were going on. In certain ways, it was a crescendo. But at the same time, all of the forces of trying to put us down, which we saw in things like the air traffic controller strike, all of that counter revolution was starting at the same time that this upwelling and when Maggie Kuhn was starting to be active. And so it's hard to tell whether things are going up or down. And so things, we're under a lot of threat now. And the question is there an upswelling, a subterranean upswelling of rebellion that we can resist with? Thank you so much for talking.
I would just like to also acknowledge Elena Porticoloni, who's put together a slideshow and shared a lot of work on Maggie and Gray Panthers, who's now at UC San Francisco Institute for Health and Aging, and Jarman Ye, who was on the national board of the Gray Panthers, Dixie Horning, who was the Gray Panthers national director in Washington, D.C., who herself is amazing, and Nicholas DiCarlo, who is my collaborator on this new book, Aging A to Z, which is a It's a radical dictionary of about 500 items, and very much a part of our at least trying to carry the lineage forward. And we are promoting the idea of emancipatory gerontology, which is an emancipatory sciences, which does exist in disability studies, does exist in some nursing studies. And the idea is to take social justice and dignity and rights, the right to have rights, and the institutional isms, and to understand empirically, theoretically, about how those institutions can be made to work for us, to work for social justice, how to work for dignity. And there are many cases that we can cite and find of dignity disavowals, where people have tried to do, not many cases unfortunately, but some cases. But the point being, let's focus on the institutional and the structural, as well as the agency and the meaning and the individual action. And to me, that's what attracted me most to Maggie, is that she was about the big forces. The big forces, but in manifest ways that we live our everyday lives and how they affect us and what can be done to lift all of us in ways that address dignity and human rights. And she was showing us how, and we've got to recommit, just really recommit to doing this and to teaching this and to bringing others along. So thank you so much for this honor and opportunity to share Maggie's birthday.
We shall not give up the fight. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started. We shall not give up the fight. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started. Together we'll have victory, hand holding.